live. So hello everyone. Hopefully you recognize my face from the video. I actually can't remember when I filmed that. That was a little while ago. So I think the beard is possibly slightly longer at this point. Unfortunately, the beard and the hair is just what lockdown does to you. So we're talking a little bit about today about making the most out of university open days. Obviously, that video that I covered was with my colleagues Dan and Jamie, and we discussed the importance of open days generally with sort of making those decisions in university research and that sort of thing. So obviously that makes up a big part of the kind of university or the next steps research that students are going to be doing hopefully over the next few months up until if they are making those decisions this year. Obviously their deadline is coming up very shortly. Otherwise, if those students are looking to apply perhaps next year, if they're in year 12, obviously university research is going to make a big part of that, and visiting those open days is also going to make a big part of that. Now obviously with the year being the way that it is and the year going the way that it's going, and going into next year, I suppose, obviously open days have been massively difficult for universities to kind of adapt to. So that's really what I wanted to kind of talk about today, and obviously answer some of the questions that were covered in the Q&A. So really just kind of getting into that and obviously discussing that. So hopefully we can cover all those things, and also, like I say, talk a little bit about how students can still take advantage of open days and do that university research in such a situation where they actually can't visit universities directly, because obviously a big part of visiting those universities is actually being able to get a bit of a feel for the place, and that's something that is obviously a lot more difficult to do when you are watching it through a webcam, as we are doing right now. So obviously, I'm not on campus. I'm in my office at home. You may occasionally just see a cat sort of run through. So that obviously plays a big part into how difficult it can be to kind of do that research. So obviously from that video, and I can't remember 100% all the things that we talked about in that video, but hopefully some of these questions will cover off some more of the topics and cover some more of the basis in terms of open days and in terms of research. So the first question I can see at the top just here, I'll kick straight into it. I don't know if people can submit additional questions, but obviously, as we talk, you are more welcome to do so if you can. The first question here says, should I just visit the university I'm interested in attending as my first choice, or should I go to more than one open day? Now, obviously, this is going to be a sort of a two-pronged question. Obviously, with my sort of university recruitment hat on, I would say definitely go to the university that you're interested in, and definitely come along to DMU's open day. But my unbiased opinion and my honest opinion actually is that you should definitely go and look at as many universities as possible, because ultimately this decision that the student is going to make is really important, that they make a decision where they are going to be somewhere that they're really happy with, that they're picking a course that they're happy with, and they're going to a university that ultimately they're going to be happy with. So obviously, I'm sure you're aware that UCAS allows you to put 5 choices on that application. I would recommend going to at least 5, going to at least the 5 choices that you are making on your UCAS application. If not, if you can, and this is very time permitting, which is why it's good to do that research early, go to a few more, because there are universities that you will visit that yourself or son, daughter, student, whoever will go to, and they'll go, actually, I know we've just driven 2.5 hours, but I really don't like this university. And I can hand on heart say that was something that I did to my parents, and they weren't best pleased at the time. So I would say go to as many universities and visit as many universities, or at least just do some research into universities. And I guess the benefit coming out of COVID is that universities are actually putting on these digital events that give you some idea about what universities can do and can offer virtually, perhaps not quite in the same capacity that they would have done if there were physical open days. They would have relied on visitors actually coming onto the campus and maybe not thought so much about people watching it online, whereas now there's obviously a very big online presence. So perhaps instead of driving 2.5 hours, you can just tune into a few different live streams, tune into a few different videos, and actually get a really good benefit out of different universities just from the comfort of your sofa or from your bedroom or wherever. So in that sense, yes, I would definitely agree. Go and find out as much about different universities as you can, particularly as you say, you have got to make 5 choices on that UCAS application, because ultimately what you don't want to do is just kind of put one down for the sake of it. You're thinking, okay, I'm really interested in, let's say, business, but actually, and these are just a selection of universities I've got, but I know I really want that one university. The other 4, I can just put whoever. But if you don't get an offer back from that one, you've then got to spend the time going back and doing that research of the other 4. So do it early and make sure that you're making the right decision from the offset. The next question is it possible to tour the campus even if it's not an open day? So again, talking more on the virtual side, hopefully this is a quick question. I am a bit chatty. Universities in their digital format can offer sort of virtual tours. So what they're able to do is, again, it's not the same, but we have been able to kind of send staff and students onto campus with phones, and using the software, the live stream software that we have been using, they've actually been able to kind of take you around all the buildings. Now, again, for social distancing, and because we've got current students on campus at the minute, even working on Saturdays, our facilities are open on a Saturday, we actually aren't able to kind of send those students into buildings. So something that you might lose out of in some capacity from a campus tour is not being able to necessarily see the inside of all of the buildings, but hopefully you will be able to see some of the key facilities, the key work areas, particularly if it's quite a practical subject, but also just be able to kind of see what the campus looks like. We're quite fortunate that our campus is very much campus based. So rather than it being sort of dotted around the city of Leicester, we have got all of our buildings kind of very close by. We've got all of our accommodation very close by, so we can kind of point those out on video and just kind of give you a bit of a feel of how long it might take to get from the accommodation to, your lecture building, for instance. So it is possible, and we are looking at opening up physical campus tours for students to come onto De Montfort University campus. But obviously then lockdown round 2 hit, and that made it very, very difficult. So keep looking at this space, keeping your eye on on university websites, and just see what kind of offerings they're going to allow you to actually go and see the campus, because I do think being able to kind of visualize and view the campus is also very important. The next question, it says, are there any specific campus facilities I should look for when choosing a university? So I already touched on looking at sort of practical facilities for your kind of sort of workspaces. So if you're going to be studying a course that is quite practical, let's say art and design, engineering, something that's sort of science related, so science facilities, midwifery, nursing, pharmacy, those sorts of things, I would definitely have a look at the sort of practical facilities in that aspect, just to see what they're like, because obviously that's where you're going to be learning a lot of these skills. And a lot of universities can pride themselves in saying that they've got equipment or facilities that will match or rival, the companies that you could go and work for afterwards, or the hospitals, or wherever it might be. So being able to kind of one-to-one replicate those sorts of facilities and those sort of practical skills, I think is really important, because again, you're not going to university just to study and kind of come out the end with a bit of paper, but you're going to learn practical skills to get you into a career, essentially. So I think that is one thing that you should certainly look out for. You can also go and look at other facilities that are going to make your university time better, whether that be something sort of sporting related, so looking for gyms, looking for sports facilities. Is it got things that are going to tick those boxes for you in that essence? When talking more facilities more generally, it might be things like accommodation, for instance. So there are certainly things that you should look out for when you are looking at the campus and looking at videos online. If we're talking a more sort of virtual open day, those are things that you should certainly be looking out for. And there's a lot of facets to the kind of university experience. I obviously mentioned sports and sporting facilities, so that might be a big part if you're a particularly sporty person, but it might be other things that you can kind of get involved in. So looking at other things that you can kind of do while you're at university, it might be, so for instance, something that I discovered when I was doing my research at De Montfort University is that they had a radio station, and I quite like the sound of my own voice, apparently. So that was something that maybe I wanted to get involved in. Or it might be that you're really interested in doing extracurricular stuff. So there's things that you can look at sort of surrounding that as well. So there's other things that you can look out for, but definitely research sort of study facilities, maybe sports facilities, look at accommodation, all those kind of things. Next question is, how would you recommend getting a feel for the university via an online visit? I have kind of touched on this already. And I think more importantly, adding on to that campus tour bit I just spoke about earlier, to try and speak to as many students as you can. And a lot of university open days will give you that opportunity. There'll be online chat platforms, there will be live streams or webinars, much in the same way as this, where they will have students sitting on that panel. It'd be quite nice if I could have a student sort of sat with me today who could answer a lot of these questions possibly better than I can. And they will be able to give you quite a nice, realistic idea of what the campus is like. It's all well and good me being an ex-student of a few years ago talking about it, and I can say, the campus is really nice, it's really friendly, there's always people milling around even at sort of 1 a.m, people that are coming home from the library or wherever. There's always people sort of milling around on campus and near the accommodation, so it's quite a nice sort of lively place, and the university feels quite lively in that essence. So obviously campus tours at the minute, them being online, you do lose a little bit that essence. And equally so, obviously, with there being the second lockdown, you might find that those campus tours again will make the campus look quite quiet, because we've had to send quite a lot of our students home. So what I would do is, from that sense, I would try and get a feel for the university by talking to students and their own experiences, and just kind of get a bit of a feel for it that way. We do have on our website a service called UniBuddy. If you go to dmu.ac.uk/student chat, I believe, and I'll try and remember to post that in the chat in a second, you can actually talk to current students on a range of different courses. So if you just wanted to kind of go, hey, I'm thinking of moving to DMU, I'm thinking of moving to Leicester, or, you know, wherever it is you're going, if other universities have a similar platform, you can say, you know, what's the nightlife like? What's the city like? What's the university like? So that is how I would get the best feel for a university. The next one was from Emily, and it says, do campus with off-site accommodation offer any dedicated transport links for disabled students? So to go more into detail with sort of support for disabled students, what they'll often do is try and situate you in accommodation that has that support. So we have accommodation that is, again, as I mentioned, quite close by. And if you speak to the disability team, if you speak to the accommodation team and say, I need this support, I might need, you know, these specific facilities, very often what they'll do is they'll make sure to situate you in a place where before you even arrive, you have got everything that you need, and you've got everything that kind of supports you during your time at university, whether it be you moving out, whether it be, you know, whilst you're in your lectures, anything like that. They will try and make sure that you get that sort of support. So what I would do is, once you've made your application and once you've got your offers back from the university, which will obviously happen sort of early next year, I would actually contact the university directly. I would say, this is what I need. This is the sort of support that I need. I want to move into accommodation. So can you offer me something that meets these requirements? And they'll make sure to tick all those kind of boxes for you. So obviously, I can't speak for other universities that have accommodation a little bit further out. I know there are universities that will offer sort of you know, bus links and that sort of thing. But I have heard of some universities offering students sort of, I was going to say taxi passes, but essentially pay for taxis for those students from the accommodation if they can't use the sort of dedicated bus service. So I would, depending on where it is you're looking to go, I would just speak to the university directly once you've got your offers. So what would be your number one thing to ask on an open day? Oh my gosh, that is a big question. I'm trying to think of what the one thing I would ask. I think it would be, and it's a really, really broad question, but a question for a student perhaps would be, you know, what's the experience like? And I would make sure to direct that to a student on a particular course. So if the course is, if you've chosen the course you're interested in, let's say psychology, and you can talk to a psychology student, I would say, what's the experience on that sort of course like? You know, the academics will tell you what you're actually going to learn. They might be able to tell you some of the assessments that you'll do, but, you know, the student might be able to say, well, actually, we do group projects where I'm able to meet lots of people, join lots of groups, and, you know, do a group presentation that was a lot of fun, but it was assessed and we got to do X, Y, and Z. It might be that this student can talk a little bit more about some of the experiments if it's more of a sciencey course, or something more practical if it's a practical course. So it's a very, very broad answer, I think, to that question, but just asking the student actually what the experience on that course is like, I think is really important, because like I say, the academics will see it from one perspective, but actually the students will obviously see it from the other, and that's the bit that you're going to experience. I think questions for academics would be something along the lines of, what am I actually going to do on this course? It's very similar to the experience, but what you've got to remember is that a lot of these courses will have specific modules that they'll cover within those courses. So it might be, and again, another really good example here is history. History at one university might be completely different to history at another university. So what you've got to make sure that you're doing is actually identifying what it is you're going to be studying or doing on those courses. If you come to DMU and you have a look at the modules in history at DMU, for instance, you'll find that they're slightly more sort of modern, they're sort of Civil War, they are sort of American history and that side of things. You might be looking more at the Industrial Revolution, whereas I know personally, if I was to study history, I would probably go for something that was more akin to sort of ancient history. So perhaps DMU wouldn't necessarily be the place I would go to study history. So things like that, I think, are really important questions. Hopefully they'll cover a lot of that on open days anyway, but if you don't find the answers to those sorts of questions and you are thinking of studying a particular subject, make sure you know what you're actually studying, because history, business, even something like psychology, they're quite broad subjects, and you might find there's a lot of different facets within those subjects that you can cover. Is it worth visiting the local city when attending an open day? So when these universities, obviously when we can open up, and when obviously the big COVID situation hopefully blows over very soon, it's definitely worth visiting the local city. If you think about it, when you go to university, you are moving out. If you are going to move away from home and go somewhere completely new, you are going to be moving somewhere that perhaps you don't know. You're going to actually be living there potentially 3-4 years. So you've got to make sure that, again, you're happy with the situation that you're in. You're happy with everything you've got around you. So I'll take Leicester and De Montfort University as another example here. We're quite close to the city. I know that it's only a short walk down the road to actually get to the campus or to get to the city centre. It's a few minute walk from my office, which is quite nice. So making sure that you've got that kind of easy access to local city is really important, whether that be for sort of part-time work, whether that be for nightlife, because obviously, the social aspect is a big part of university and the university experience for a lot of students. But even from that perspective, what other things can you do? If you're a really big cinema goer, is there a cinema you can get access to? Have a look at other things you can get involved in around the city. What sort of things can you get up to? I know there's a sort of a bowling alley, and I think there's 2 mini golf courses in Leicester as well that have popped up in the last couple of years. So, there's stuff to do, and it looks really exciting. You've got all your shops that you need. If you need a big supermarket nearby because you like to go clothes shopping or whatever it is, just make sure that you've got that kind of easy access to those, or there's bus transport links and that sort of thing. So I would definitely think it's worth just visiting a local city and just seeing what you've kind of got access to there to make sure that you're happy with where you are essentially moving to for 3 to 4 years. Next one. So what should a parent or carer be looking for when they attend open days? So there's a lot of things that parents can kind of get involved with in the sort of open day research aspect. It's great when they can kind of go along and support students with that kind of research process. And again, I do always say that it is very much the student's decision on where they go, if they get a really good feel for a place, or making sure they've got everything that they kind of need. But ultimately, the parents are going to be looking out for the price of accommodation and costings. If the finance side of things is really important, we get quite a lot of questions about the sort of safety of the campus, which again I think is really important. Making sure that the students, that whilst they're there for 3 to 4 years, that they're safe and they're happy and they've got everything they need from that perspective. So I think that's a really handy question, but also just helping the students with those sort of decisions. So if there's things that you sort of think about as you're kind of going through the day, pose those questions to academics, or, go and have a one-to-one chat with the teachers, or go and have a one-to-one chat with staff. I tend to have a stall with my colleagues on an open day, and we answer questions like, safety, or we answer questions about, possible job opportunities from certain courses or anything like that. So there's lots of questions that can come from a parent or guardian on an open day. And I think it's really important that you're just sort of aware of the situation to help with that kind of decision-making process. And speaking of things like opportunities and job opportunities, those are massively important, and they're not always the first questions that students will come up with. They go, actually, I really like business, so I'm going to study that, without actually thinking, well, hang on, this is where it's going to help me get a job at some point. So what job opportunities can I get from a degree in this area? And you might find that helps you kind of piece together what decisions you're going to make if you're looking at really broad subject areas. Because I keep saying business, but we actually don't have a dedicated business course. We have courses within the business area, but they're very much focused around particular subjects like management, marketing, human resources, etc. So sometimes it can be really handy for them to take a step back and just go, well, actually, we know you're interested in business, but ultimately, what is it you would like to do? And that can sometimes help with the decision-making process, or help you kind of decide which lectures you're going to visit, or what accommodation you're going to go to, or anything like that. I mentioned finance because, again, that plays a big role into the university experience. Don't think there's any questions about it. I'm not going to go into too much detail now, but obviously accommodation varies on price. You've got to factor in travel costs for the student, coming home, whether it be Christmas or every weekend to do your laundry like I did. There's various things that you can consider around that. So there's lots of things that you can be considering as you're either walking around an open day or watching it online. Somebody is going to have to stop me and tell me when I reach time, because again, I do have a habit of talking over. Next one. So now that we have moved to virtual open days, how do you advise we consider aspects such as the local area, nearest shops, accommodation and transport? Okay, so I have kind of touched on this already, Jessica, so apologies for kind of doubling up slightly, but as I said before, it is really important that you do have that research. Obviously, things like Google Maps are brilliant, because what you can do is, if you can find out the postcode or the actual address of something like the accommodation, let's say, for instance, you can go, right, okay, well, where is the nearest supermarket? Where is, you know, the nearest bus route to the town centre, or how long is it to walk to the town centre or whatever? So, you know, there's lots of facilities online, things like Google Maps that you can use. And very often, like I say, talk to students. Current students are brilliant at just kind of giving you the lowdown on that. You know, they are the ones that once they've done a big Tesco shop, they are the ones that have to carry it back to their accommodation. So they'll be able to give you, you know, a realistic idea of where the nearest shops are and all that sort of thing if you've not had a look online yet. So yeah, current students are brilliant for that sort of thing. When it comes to things like, because I think part-time jobs becomes or can play a big part into the university experience for those students that do just want a little bit of sort of extra pocket money to spend on, again, things like going out and cinema trips and that sort of thing. So very often what you can do there is just have a look at the local city, look at what kind of shops are available, see if you can contact any of them to find part-time work, because sometimes actually that can be really important. And if students have got a job at the minute with a chain, you know, McDonald's or a supermarket like Tesco, sometimes they can ask for internal transfers. So whilst you can't actually go and see what is nearby, at least you can have a look online and start to ask those questions. And obviously accommodation and transport links are really important. We do very often do live streams dedicated to accommodation. So again, you can see how far away they are. I'm hoping that universities where their accommodation is a bit further out, they'll talk about those transport links. Unfortunately, I say unfortunately, we're quite fortunate that ours are all within walking distance. So we kind of don't have that problem. We'll have, you know, get that question a lot. But we do very often get students that will just say, right, well, how long does it take to get to that one? And I'll say, right, okay, well, that one's 2 minutes, but that one might be 10 minutes if you're a slow walker. So that's, again, something worth considering when you're looking at the accommodation. And also, again, transport, because obviously transport to get home, transport to go places. Again, we're quite fortunate, middle of the country. We've got transport links to London, to Birmingham, via trains and via quite a good coach service that's in the centre as well. Hope that answers the question. Next question. So, should I allow my child to attend open days on their own? Should I encourage them to go with friends, or at least if I drop them off? Sorry, I muddled that one slightly. I think I really bigged up the idea of parents and guardians and carers actually having a big part of the decision-making process with open days, because and generally university research, because sometimes they can take a little bit of a step back and actually go, well, what is it you're looking for? Or they can sort of take a step back and see some of the things that crop up on an open day, whether that be from a lecture that you know you've attended with your child, or whether that be you know, from things that you've sort of observed throughout the day. So sometimes I think it's worth you being on campus as well and just seeing what it looks like, getting a bit of a feel for it. So even if they do go with friends, I would just try and be there. Even if you let them go to the lectures on their own, sometimes it's quite nice for you just to kind of take a wander, treat it as a bit of a day out for yourself perhaps, and, you know, go to the nearest town centre and just see what that's like. Have a look to see if there's any jobs going so that you can get in there early. I don't know, there's things that you can kind of get in quite early with stuff like that. So I would say it's sometimes worth you just seeing it at least the once if you don't go for multiple visits, which some students do. It's quite nice when students can go with friends because they do get a bit of a day out from it. But again, I can talk from experience that I don't think you absorb as quite as much information on an open day if you are there with friends, because some students can treat it as a bit of a day out. They can sometimes maybe get a bit distracted by friends. They sometimes want to stick together because obviously it's an unusual place, and they might not necessarily go to everything that they specifically want to see. And you've got to remember that this decision is for that student and that student alone. It's not for the student and their friends. So whilst I'm talking again quite broadly and covering a lot of different areas, there's a lot of things that you can unpack from that. If you know that you can get there a couple of times, or you know the student is particularly maybe set or making that decision, maybe go once with their friends for the initial visit and then go a second time after they've submitted their application. So, you know, this time, or I say this time next year, you know, in a few months' time after they've submitted the application, once they've narrowed it down to their 5 choices and they've put those on the UCAS application, go for a repeated visit so that you can iron out anything else that you weren't able to get in that first visit. And maybe that can be the opportunity to take parents and guardians, because that will be the opportunity for you to see the accommodation, or for you to, you know, find out about the sports teams and that sort of thing. The next question, as a parent, are there any specific talks you would suggest I attend on a virtual open day? So again, this will vary from university to university in terms of what they offer. First and foremost, I think obviously the most important thing that you do at least once is go and visit a subject lecture, because they are going to give you the information about the thing that you are going to be studying. So that is the thing that I would say go to first and foremost. They will very often run those. They can sometimes run those twice, or what they'll do is they'll run one session and then they'll have the opportunity to do sort of Q&As afterwards. So if there are clashes between a couple of different sessions, or if there are clashes between, if you miss the first session because you're at another university online open day or anything like that, you can very often either catch them up and watch them back if they're digital. Again, another benefit of them being online. But you will also have the opportunity to jump into a Q&A session with somebody on that course just to ask any questions that you might have. Other things that I would check out, obviously accommodation is one, but that might be one for a repeated visit, as I mentioned just a moment ago. I would also go to things like the subject support sessions. So whether, and this depends on a student situation, but something like the student support sessions or the study support sessions will have things like sort of essay writing workshops that they'll be able to talk about. Obviously, they won't cover those all in the live stream, but they'll talk about the opportunities that students can go along to those sessions to learn more about how to write essays or how to use the library. Or those student support sessions might be, and we had a question about disability earlier, might be talking more specifically about disability and welfare. As a parent or carer, it might be that they cover in that session things like safety and security on campus. So those are ticking kind of those boxes on both sides. There are usually sessions about sort of student life. So whether that be the life in terms of the nightlife, whether that be the sort of experiences the student can have within the city. It might be covering things like sports teams and societies. And I know I've mentioned those quite a lot, but they will, in my eyes, and again, this is talking from my own experiences, be the things that the students kind of remember the most about their university experience is usually the sports teams and the societies and the things they kind of get involved in. So I did a computer science degree. So nothing to do with marketing, which is what I work in now. But because I joined the Media Society and I was in charge of the university magazine for 2 years, that gave me skills to kind of get into a job in marketing and media, which is what I do now. So I think sports teams and societies and being part of those teams, not only are they fun, not are they a great way of making friends, but they are brilliant at just developing skills and just kind of making that university experience better. And I highly recommend students join at least one society when they get to university, because they say that's, for me, that's the thing that I look on most fondly, and very often they'll talk about that in a student life live stream or in a student life talk at the university. So definitely check those out. And the other live streams will cover things like admissions. So if you've got any questions about applications or certain qualifications, that's a really good one to go to. Trying to think if there's any more that I think are, I was going to say, really, I should say that they're all very important. You should try and go and watch as many as you can. But again, really, it's down to personal preference and it's down to personal circumstance. So when you book onto those virtual open days, we're talking virtually at the minute, have a look at what's on the schedule, see what you can get to, see what times they're on. And if there are any that you've missed, but you want to see, I know for our open day, you can just scroll back in the schedule, click on them, and you can just watch them back a little bit later. So they tend not to stay live until after the weekend's finished, but you can at least go back and watch them again afterwards if you do miss any. And then the last question on this list, I can't see any more. I will refresh the page in just a moment. Should I consider looking at private rented accommodation during an open day? I'm just going to refresh the page to make it no more. No, that is the last one on there. So private rented accommodation. So perhaps not for first years necessarily. So private rented accommodation is fantastic usually for second or third year students, and it can be a really good thing for students that apply much later. So if you've got any students that come through clearing, so clearing, if you don't know, is when universities open all of their phone lines again and their applications open again in sort of around results day to kind of fill those gaps for the courses that have still got gaps around sort of results day. So for those students that don't get into their first choice university and they're sort of left without an offer at a university, they can use clearing to make those late applications and actually get made an offer on results day. And if university accommodation is already full at that stage, obviously private rented accommodation can be really useful for that. We haven't found that our accommodation is full come clearing. We're quite fortunate that we still seem to have rooms available. So we haven't had that problem for the last couple of years. Obviously, I can't speak for the future, but I think it's a case of rented accommodation can be useful for that. I would say rented accommodation or private rented accommodation or private rented, even private housing is sometimes an option for a lot of students. It's brilliant when you get to your second and third year because you're able to then take on a lot of those responsibilities yourself. As a student, you are then looking after your rent, you're then looking after your bills, and you've got to cover all that kind of paperwork and do all that. And I think that's a really big step actually in terms of that sort of independence and maturity that you gain. And it's also a really good way of being able to move in with the people that you choose when you're looking at your university and you're picking university. Once you've made your firm choice, you'll then get to pick accommodation through the university. Now, you don't have to do that. You can go straight to private, but the benefit of doing accommodation through the university is you get that safety, you get that security. And I'm not speaking physical security. I mean, you're securing that room for yourself that you know is at least going to be up to the university standard, which unfortunately with private, you're not always guaranteed. So at least with something like that, you are able to kind of go, okay, well, this is university accommodation. I know it's going to be pretty good. I know it's going to be secure as well, if we are talking physical security and safety. And they kind of randomize the rooms, based on the students that are coming in. So, you're kind of going to be with first years. And I just think that's a really good way, again, of making lots of friends. It can be quite nerve-wracking for a lot of students. I know that, again, when I moved into accommodation, it was quite scary because I'd never lived on my own before. But honestly, I moved out in my first year. I stayed in university halls and I really haven't ever looked back. I've kind of rented privately ever since. And it really is a kind of step in the right direction for kind of getting that independence and getting that maturity. But I do think university accommodation for your first year, just to kind of, get the ball rolling. And then if you decide to not stay in university accommodation for the following years, a lot of universities will give you that option to stay there if you want. But if you decide to go with rented a second and third year because you've got a group of friends or there's people on your course that you want to live with, then brilliant. You can start house hunting, which again is possibly a new experience for a lot of students anyway. You can then obviously look at renting privately, whether it be a house or a private flat or something like that. There are opportunities there for you to do so. So I think that's all of my questions. I can see John's posted a message saying, please say whatever you want. Feel free to call off whenever you like. Brilliant. I was going to say, don't give me an open platform because I will just chat here all night. University open days going digital has been a huge struggle. My role isn't normally dealing with open days particularly. I tend to work on an open day because I give advice, but because we move them all kind of virtually and over to live streams, we've been trying to produce quite a lot of different live streams. So I'm one of the sort of key producers for our sort of campus tour live streams. And, even though I was sort of talking about them not having a massively big sort of impression of the feel for a university, obviously I'm the one in charge of those live streams, and it has been really difficult to kind of one-to-one make those open days and make those live streams as impactful as when students visit them. But I still think there is an awful lot to gain from visiting live streams and virtual open days. So whilst, yes, they will never be the same as actually being able to walk onto campus and see it for yourself, I think there's still a lot of really rewarding information you can get from it. Sometimes it's actually a better platform for talking to other students and talking to staff because you haven't got that fear of kind of walking up to somebody, which I know can be quite nerve-wracking for some people. And also very often, if there's lots of people, lots of questions, they may not have time to kind of get around to everyone, whereas sometimes a live format can make that a little bit quicker and a bit more condensed. So try and see the benefits of it. I know that I have, trying to see the benefits of these sort of open platforms, these open live streams, because I'm able to kind of talk to more people. But I've been sat from this very chair for most of it. So yeah, try and see the benefits, try and absorb as much information as you can. And at least this way, with these digital open days, you can at least go and see a few of the universities that maybe were further afield that you maybe wouldn't have been able to get to physically previously. That's obviously another massive benefit for you. But other than that, I haven't really got anything else to add that wasn't probably in the video or me rambling on here. So I just want to say thank you very much to the team for inviting me along to come and talk today. It's been much appreciated. I do hope your students find it really useful. And again, if there's anything I can do in the future when it comes to stuff like this, obviously just give me a shout. But yeah, I hope that was useful to everyone. Hopefully we'll see you at the next DMU Open Day. I know that there is one this weekend. I'm that impartial, I forget to plug my own Open Day. But there is one coming up this Saturday. So obviously make sure you tune into that if you are interested in the courses at DMU. But until then, have a lovely evening. Everybody stay safe, and we'll see you soon.